Nice crowd. You really pack them in. This is good. Thank you all for coming today. Really looking forward to this conversation with Don. I'm sure all of you have had many conversations with those of you who know him, have had conversations with him over the years. It's probably been more about foot problems than about art necessarily. Some of them, yes. I've had the pleasure of speaking with Don both about my foot problems and art. Luckily, more extensively about the art. And I'm looking forward to sharing, having now lived with this show, for several weeks. It's really not just, it immediately spoke to me, but it's since really grown on me, and I've found new things in all the pieces, and just continue to look deeper and deeper into it, and so looking forward to talking about some of that. But before we start, I want to make a special acknowledgement, and that is to your husband, Jorge, who has been indispensable in the hanging, the promotion, and the administration of this show. Thank you so much, Jorge, for everything. And so with that, if you didn't know already, I'm Tony Wessling. I'm the director of Radian Gallery. Our mission is really to take the work of California artists and bring it out to the world. And we've been doing that since about 2018. There was this thing in between. There was this little break. I don't remember. I'm sure you don't remember much about that either. But despite that break, we came back stronger than ever, and we've had great shows. Don has been in a number of them. He's been in several of our annual botanical theme shows, where his work is also readily received. And of course, Don has just come off of a really great show in New York at the Solomon Gallery, the Code Switching Show, and he's also showing at 2358 Market. You'll be in Tiburon soon. Where else?
Sausalito Cultural
Arts Center. If you haven't been there, it's an awesome ferry ride over, and it's right there in what used to be the Bank of America there in Sausalito. Really great venue. Highly recommend you get over there if you can. But here we are with this show, I Am a Barn, and of course I'll let you expound a bit on the theme. But before we do that, I'd like to hear a little bit about your earliest inspirations. You were born and raised in New York.
That's right.
And not New York like somewhere nearby, in New York, in the Bronx and Brooklyn.
No,
right?
in Brooklyn, yeah. The thing about New York, I went to public school. We were working class, but the public school system back then in New York included field trips to the opera, to the ballet, to all the museums. It was part of your education. Of course, you don't realize that. You're living in New York and you think everyone's exposed to that level of art and culture, but it was just a part of part of the program. And it did resonate with me as I matured and became an adolescent. I started to become fascinated with art.
Mm-hmm. And did you start creating art as an adolescent, or?
I always had this aptitude for drawing, and I would draw like portraits of my family and things like that. It would be almost like a joke, like draw me, because Donnie can draw.
Right.
It was that type of thing. And I didn't feel I had the chops as a young person to pursue that as a career. I didn't have that artistic temperament that I just said, I'm going to be an artist. I excelled in the sciences. I enjoy them, and growing up in a working class family with 5 children, your parents, my parents had a very good marriage, but they did fight about money because we were always short of money. And I think that had quite an impact on me. I needed to have a secure future, and so the sciences were, for me, an easy path, and I didn't really take the art that seriously at that young an age.
And so off to medical school you went,
Right.
Which was I mean, this is a long journey.
Right.
And at what point during your medical career, which must have been, especially in the early days, very, very consuming, both in terms of your time and the intensity, at what point did you find that there was space to really look for the art?
Well, there was no space, but I did use my drawing skills to portray anatomical figures and relationships by drawing them rather than memorizing them, because the exams were so specific about what was superior to this structure and what was lateral to this structure. So I made these elaborate drawings on index cards, and so I did utilize the skill, and then I just put them away, and then every 10 years when I had to take my boards, I would get them out and start rememorizing. Yeah, that's how it manifested.
Yeah, for any of you who went to art school or medical school, there was probably a book which a lot of people know as the TV show Grey's Anatomy, but there was a book called Grey's Anatomy, which was the quintessential book. Or there was another, not quite as good, called Risher's Anatomy, but these were incredibly detailed drawings of illustrations of the various parts of the human anatomy, and whether you decided you wanted to be an abstract artist or a sculptor or a photographer, you had to study anatomy, because understanding the human figure and how it moved was an important part. But you were looking at the human figure in a very different way. You were looking how to fix it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother, how to fix it is a whole nother learning trajectory. But memorizing is not something I really enjoy doing, and even though I have a good memory, but it was a great tool, and it was when my first partner saw those, when I had to take my boards 10 years after graduating medical school, I got out all my cards, and he saw these drawings, and he was an artist, and he said, it's a waste that you're just not exercising this talent. And he made the analogy of drawing as like playing an instrument. And unless you practice, you're not going to evolve, because you need to create a discipline where you're drawing on a regular basis, and you will evolve. So I said, well, maybe I should take a class. And he said, no, don't take a class. That would be the worst thing you can do. Just keep on moving, do your own thing. Don't lose your voice.
And so that you started to do that, and of course, that coincided with then what turns out to be all of our lives' journeys, and you end up on this end of it. You're 70 this year?
Yes.
Yeah. When you end up on the other side of 50, which happens overnight, I'm sure you've all noticed, you suddenly realize that life has dealt you certain cards. It's put you in certain unexpected situations. It's punched you. It's lifted you up. It's done all this stuff, and that's really where you started to see yourself in these pieces. But it started with this piece behind me,
Yes.
the Mendocino House.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the visual journey, and what was going on in your mind as when you first looked at Mendocino House and decided that it was worthy of becoming a piece of art. How did this happen?
Well, it happened where Jorge and I were taking road trips at the severe lockdown period, where everything was sort of very eerie and quiet, and everybody was hovering at home with masks on and walking around in spacesuits. So we took a drive out. I'm not one that really loved road trips, but we took a drive out to Mendocino, and I saw these old dilapidated barns along the road, and it was sort of this perfect storm of it being a lockdown and so quiet and everything was so strange, and you see these old structures still standing there, you know, in their little isolation and with all their dilapidation, and like what have they been through and what are we going through right now? You know, we're going through another pandemic, and I just had this moment where I thought to myself, these farms have endured, you know, all these natural disasters, you know, floods, heat, storms, and as humans, here I was now experiencing a second pandemic, and I reflected on, you know, my own personal loss, my own personal joys, and the fact that I was still healthy and surviving. And these barns just resonated to me as a metaphor for that. And I photographed a whole bunch of them, and I brought them home, and they sat in my studio, and eventually one day I just drew one, and that was this one. It was a very dull photograph. It was a black and white photograph. It was not very interesting. But, you know, as an artist, you can make something into your own, and you can put your voice into whatever you want. That's the fun of it. That's the joy of it. And I painted this piece. Of course, I was very obsessed with it. You can see the details. It's a little OCD painting, but it did inspire the entire series.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about, you know, this last pandemic and the first one, you know, the AIDS pandemic, and there was huge loss for you there. You lost your partner during the AIDS epidemic, and so when you started to do this, at what point did you realize that your challenges, the things you had overcome, like getting through medical school, you know, I think that you mentioned that as a child you were, you know, growing up in tough New York, it was not exactly an easy existence. That there was a lot of, you know, tougher kids out there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so you've got bullying, then you've got this achievement going from public school to medical school, becoming a physician, and then only to come out here to San Francisco and think that your life was going fine, and then to lose your partner. And I mean, at what point did you start to process?
Well, this is the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of us get a free pass. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think you know, loss and also joy, love. I mean, it just makes you richer. I mean, getting through an illness, getting a diagnosis and surviving it. I mean, this all makes you more sensitive as a human being, and it makes you deeper. And as an artist, I think it really affects your work in a very positive way. I mean, you could be angry, and that could be expressed in your work as well. I'm not that person, you know. But I think that the accumulation of human experience makes you a more interesting person and a more interesting artist, I think. Mm-hmm. You know, and this recognition I'm getting right now, you know, I think it's the perfect time in my life for it to happen. I'm glad that this did not happen when I was 30. I don't think I had the chops or the life experience to really, you know, you can have imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
you know, and I still have imposter syndrome, but I have it a lot less right now.
Mm-hmm. And along the way, I mean, some of the work that we've shown at this gallery and that you've done in your other shows, it's been everything from still life. Don's work has been in several of our, as I said, our botanical themed shows, and also, again, the code switching show, which was stylized portraiture.
Yes.
And so over the years, you've explored a lot of different subject matters, but this seems more, you know, again, more not introspective, but retrospective.
Well, I think it's personal.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's personal. I mean, the other shows, I always like to have a message when I do a show. Code switching was a sociological phenomenon that I wanted to make people aware of. Generally, I like to have a message, then rather than just say, this is my new work, isn't it beautiful? You know, which you can do. I mean, you can do a show where you play with proportions, which I'm thinking about doing in the future for some reason. But I like to elevate my audience, or at least to inform them or to engage them in conversation based on the subject of what the show is as a whole, not as individual paintings.
Mhm.
And this show is quite, it's just interesting, the timing of this show and the message, because the message surprises me and becomes even more and more relevant as I talk about it.
Mhm. Yeah, and certainly, like I said, having lived with these for several weeks now, it's becoming, you know, ever more relevant for me too. And I also have been able to spend time with them and seeing certain cultural references that I want to know if you intended. Like I see Wyeth, I see the famous painting, you know,
Yes, Christine's World.
Christine's World, yeah, sitting up towards. It's just something about that.
Yeah.
It hit me when I was looking at that. And similarly, the Mendocino house, you could almost put the American Gothic couple in front of them because you played with the proportions here.
Yes.
And was that conscious or no?
No.
Interesting.
But you know, it's all hindsight. But yeah, you know, after I did that piece, I mean, when I started to do the smaller pieces, which is after we decided to do the show, I decided I have to do some small pieces. So I went through this, you know, this kind of intense period where I was doing all these small pieces. I do want to play with depth and perspective on those. It was only after this piece was finished that I thought about Wyeth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have mentioned Wyeth. I've never really mentioned him, but yeah, I thought about Wyeth
Mm-hmm.
because of the depth of field.
Yes,
That's a great piece. I love that piece.
And in a way, I mean, the fact that Wyeth influenced you or American Gothic influenced you, but even if it was subconsciously,
Yeah.
It actually still works into the idea that, you know, barns and these other structures are built, and especially barns were built before architects, you know, made all the drawings and made it, you know, a barn was something that was built by a community.
Yeah, organically.
You know,
Yeah.
organically, they just knew how to do it. And of course, every different society builds barns in different ways, and builds shacks in different ways. And so that's where I think it's interesting is that it's not like anybody told them how to build a barn. It developed organically over the years, and that was just something that was learned in the community.
Well, it's a little bit like your collective unconsciousness.
Yes.
You know, I mean, you know, it's like some things are just in your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and who knows how much of that plays out in our talents and in what we choose to pursue.
Mm-hmm. And apart from Mendocino and the California coast, what are some of these other locations that people are seeing? Obviously, there's tropical places.
Well, most of the ones that I photographed are from California.
Mm-hmm.
And then once things went into, like, once we had this show actually going into fruition, I did a lot of research on stock footage of Depression era homes and barns.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to research because I like them on the frontal plane. I like things photographed on the frontal plane for this particular show. A few of the pieces are skewed and off, you know, they're slightly angled, but I wanted to think of these as portraits. So I wanted to be like a full frontal face of the barns.
Right.
So, you know, I had tons and tons and tons of printouts of barns in black and white, and I just would, you know, finish a piece, and then I start combing through them, and I think maybe this one, maybe that one, and Jorge sees me go through this process. Jorge would say, do that one, and I would say, oh, I don't know, you know. But I did try to, at some point I did try to map the show out and just make decisions so I could just move quickly from one piece to the next.
Mm-hmm. And the pieces themselves is something that you noted to me and that I've become quite fond of, and that is that you discovered that strategic underpainting was far more effective in the final image than trying to paint from a white canvas on down. You started with an orange canvas, or in this case, a purple canvas,
yes.
and build on top of it.
Yes.
And I find it really interesting because it leaves behind these, would be impossible to, or very difficult to add in details, the fine line, the crackling that comes from the edge of the tape, or the texture of the surface of the panel, and so you're able to get these very fine, very pronounced lines that cause the painting to sort of to oscillate with energy and visual interest.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, not to minimize, but you learn tricks.
Mm-hmm.
If you're painting enough, you make happy mistakes that you keep. So once I discovered this process, and all artists have a process. Every artist that is producing a lot of work has a formula or a process that they develop, and they fine-tune it, and then you become more and more proficient. And when I started working on wood, I would gesso the wood, which you need to do before you start to paint, and then I would I don't remember the moment where I discovered this, because we're going back about probably around 5 or 6 years, but I would prime the wood in a color twice, 2 coats, and then let that dry, like bone dry, and then I begin the drawing, and the drawing is very methodical. It's especially with the barns, it's drafting, and then you have to use your imagination. But when that's completely done, then the painting starts, and then I go to town. I mean, the painting is the fastest part of the painting. The planning is the arduous, laborious part. It's always very daunting when you look at a blank canvas and you think, okay, I got to start over. And then the whole process of gessoing and priming and letting it dry, and then getting out your ink and your pencil and starting to draw. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then when that's done, then you can really have fun.
Yeah.
That's when you have fun. The first part is not as much fun. Mm-hmm. Not for me.
But you're well versed in it, because obviously in your professional life, you have to preparation and standard operating procedure, and there's no room for error in what you do in surgery.
Surgery is a whole. There is a parallel universe for me, which is very individual, for surgery and painting, because I do think the same part of my brain is working when I'm in that zone of movement. And surgery is not as exact as you think. You need to be able to improvise a lot, and you need to be able to just wing it. I don't overthink surgeries. I don't obsess with them, no matter how difficult they're going to be. The difficult ones are not the ones that give you trouble anyway. You learn that in the bigger picture of surgery. But I tend to pretty much, I draw my, preoperatively I draw my angles and I figure out what I need to do. But then I just go in there and I just wing it. And that's the way painting is as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not as scary as surgery. The surgery is not scary to me anymore because I do it so frequently. Yes. So you have to remove that fear factor, which is why you can get into that zone of just, painting or operating. Well,
there can be certainly, I imagine you've experienced this, I hear this from artists all the time, that there is a fear factor, that you approach, especially a blank canvas,
yeah.
Even if you think that you have a great concept, that first mark, you know, is it going to be successful? Where is this going? Am I completely full of shit with this idea? So there is a lot of fear and trepidation in approaching a painting as well.
Yeah, it's always, the blank canvas is very daunting, absolutely. And then, the patient, is like a complete unknown as well, personality-wise, and you have to figure out everything, not only based on what you have to do, but who that person is and whether they're really, there's a lot of pre-operative decision-making you need to do to prepare the patient and whether you really think surgery is an option. But for me, I don't know, it's a very comfortable place to be at this time of my life.
And another sort of technique, but also delving into the conceptual realm. At a certain point, you started to really remove context. In some of the early pieces when you were developing this, I remember coming to the studio and seeing you would put a figure here, or you'd put a still life of some sort there. And in many of the pieces, and some of the ones that I think are most compelling, you have actually completely removed the context and turned it into a color field.
Yes.
In which the structure floats.
Yes. That was difficult to do. That was a difficult decision to make, because when I was booked to do the show, these pieces here behind me and a couple of pieces downstairs, they were done years ago, and they had a lot more detail, and I wanted the show to be contextual. So going back and actually editing a painting that's already done with a date and signed, I had to take my name off it. I removed the date, and I edited the painting so they were cleaner and they didn't have as much distraction. I mean, for instance, there was a dog in front of that house. Now, it was painful to take that dog away, but I did. And this one, there were two people sitting on that brick wall, which I got rid of them, and so on and so forth. And it's challenging because you're using new fresh paint. How do you match the colors? You have to repaint the entire sky because you may have to. I think I did. I think I did paint the sky over because I needed to make sure that it didn't look like I edited the painting.
And the effect then of isolating the structure. As you did that, what were you thinking in terms of how this would interest or benefit or more greatly engage the viewer?
Well, I make the analogy of these being similar to human portraits. Like they have these buildings and these edifices or barns or shacks, they have personalities and faces. And I purposely wanted everything on the frontal plane so they look like portraiture almost. Some of them, if you stare at them enough, they look like they have eyes and nose and mouth. Some of them more than others. But I wanted to make that parallel universe because there is a humanity behind them. So I thought eliminating, editing these and then even taking it further where it became more conceptual, where I just have the structure floating on a canvas. And I purposely, I had done one, and then I decided I had to do two more, and I did two more. And what it does is it makes the viewer focus on the smallest details of the structure. You can see every little detail of every missing window and every little board that's missing.
It also, for me, removes, there's a certain sentimentality that you see when you see a landscape around a barn.
Yes.
And so when you take that away, that it's no longer a sentimental portrait of a barn, it is a cerebral portrait of a barn.
Yes, it's something very cerebral, especially about the floating ones. I think those are very, I find those very strong, very powerful.
I do too. I do too. And sort of from a larger perspective, who are some of the artists who you've found, not necessarily, I mean, influenced, but really have driven you to say, I want to do something, if not like that, as important as that?
Well, I mean, David Hockney is a great influence because he works, his process is similar to my process, and I love his work. And of course, I'm a huge fan of, Picasso and all that all his compatriots. I mean, the Fauvists. I love Fauvism in portraiture. Those were the most influential. I mean, Hockney is more in my adult life, but what I was exposed to was, as a child and as a young adult, was Matisse and Picasso and Toulouse-Lautrec and that whole Gertrude Stein gang was like, I was very much there with them. That's the like I was not as influenced with Renaissance art. I mean even though it's beautiful, it didn't influence me really. It's more expression, more like an expressionist type of art.
Right. So if you had the choice of painting a Raphael foot or an Albrecht Dürer foot, they were known for their exquisite paintings of feet, or a Philip Guston foot, you'd go in the Guston direction.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I might go in the Don Hershman direction.
The Don Hershman direction. You talked about these anatomy drawings. Have you ever thought about that as as obvious as it seems? Would you ever paint portraits of feet? Because each foot being different and interesting, and you looking at feet all day long.
No.
Busman's holiday, right?
And the feet are actually pretty hard to paint.
Yeah, they are.
As are hands.
They are. Hands and feet are among the most difficult.
Yes,
without a doubt. That's why I mentioned people who can do it well.
Yeah,
do it
but
very well.
I have painted feet, because you have to, and I paint hands because you have to.
Yeah,
But they're challenging, hands and feet.
they sure are. Does anybody in the audience have questions for Don? Yeah.
I have two. I'm interested, have you ever thought about publishing your medical school drawings? Number one. Number two, I'd like to hear a little bit, if you're willing to share, what you're thinking in terms of your next project in proportion, dealing with proportions.
The first question is, they're gone.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a long story, but I don't have them anymore. And the second question is, actually, I am thinking about playing with proportions on the next show, and I'm not sure what that means. I've already have a mock-up of the next painting. Actually, Catherine, you planted the seed when I spoke to you, and I for some reason that playing with proportions stayed in my head, and I did a mock-up of a painting that's sitting in my kitchen. I stare at it every day. I have a very big canvas in my studio that I'm ready to, once all this drama is over, I'm gonna start.
It's good drama.
Speaking of
It's good drama.
of drama and all this drama, and we'll go back to you. How you must have a very regimented life, or schedule, because you're a surgeon, you've got your practice, and you are massively prolific. I assume you sleep at some point.
Yeah, I sleep a lot. I think if you survived coming from a place where you really had, I think it's a generational thing. My generation, my parents were Depression era, so we had no parachute. So if you were motivated in your life, you develop certain skills related to discipline, and I think going through all the education and residency and all that stuff, are what I think of as discipline. Most people can't even imagine. But it's not that much of an effort for me. I mean, I see patients from 7 in the morning till 1, and I'm basically on stage and I do my thing and I love it. And then I go home and I take a nap. And I usually exercise after that, and then Jorge and I have dinner, and I go to the studio and I paint. If I'm working on a project, I'll be at the studio a lot, but I have that, as long as I have that nap, which I have without a problem, I'm out I'm literally out in a second.
I'm there with you.
And then I'm up and I'm ready to go, and if I'm in the middle of a project, like doing the I Am a Barn, I'm in that studio, and I can't help it. I'm like, can't wait to get to the studio. I mean, exercising is something I do, and it's always something that interferes with my schedule, but I do it because it's like I gotta keep this physical vessel moving, because that's part and parcel to being able to accomplish what I do.
Yeah.
So if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to really do this type of stuff. But I don't feel exhausted. I do have moments where I feel overwhelmed, but most of the time I'm just pretty steady.
Good. I saw it really pretty. Yeah. Go ahead.
I had a couple things I wanted to ask. The barn in the center there, is that one that, I swear I've seen that barn, and I'm trying to figure out where it is. Do you
Well,
remember?
it's definitely going to be it's definitely in Northern California.
Okay.
Looks like Bolinas to
And-
me, because of
Yeah.
the dunes in the back.
Yeah, I think so too. And I keep looking at that painting of the house in the distance, and I keep expecting to see a plane flying in any second. Like
Yeah,
from
but it could
northwest.
also be
Like a Hitchcock movie.
Yeah.
Well, it could also be 1910,
That's
before
true.
airplanes.
Yeah, that's true.
So yes, that's true, but
Yeah.
it's a certain, well, it's not timeless, but it's certainly, it could be 100
Yeah.
something years ago.
Other questions? Wow. Oh, there we are.
A quick one, when did you start painting? You might have mentioned this and I wasn't here, I'm sorry.
I started painting, I started drawing I was drawing in my childhood, but I started drawing seriously around residency. When I was studying for boards, I was painting anatomical figures. But I always had an aptitude for drawing. And I started drawing seriously around 1992. That's when I really started to become very disciplined. It does take years and years. Drawing. I think drawing is the key for me as an artist. I'm not the artist that just starts slapping paint on a canvas. I see all these videos on TikTok of artists creating, and sometimes I'm intimidated by it because I'm not that artist. I'm not that artist that just can spontaneously start throwing paint onto a canvas. It's just not how I operate. And I think it has to do with my science background and my, and my history as an artist. It just doesn't, but I admire, I'm in awe of it because I don't do it, because I can't do it.
Right. Sometimes I'm in awe of it. Sometimes I look, I'm like, you shouldn't let people see how easily that sausage is made. Like you see, they pour this and then they scrape it and they've got and then they're like done. And I'm like, oh, you just blew the magic. It's like
There's a je ne sais quoi to that. Some of them have their finger on the pulse of what people respond to.
yeah.
It's amazing that it's like, everybody responds to their work, and it's just abstract work, but even I respond to it, so,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
And what about abstraction? Have you ever, because all the work I've ever seen from you is figurative.
I think it might be in the future. I mean, I think this playing with proportions is going to move me into something different, and I thought, the abstract artists that I admire most are the ones that had the discipline to learn how to draw before they went into abstraction.
Yeah.
So I think, I've drawn for enough decades have passed of me being very disciplined about drawing for me to explore that, but I'm not quite there yet. I think I want to play with proportions first and see how that goes.
Very good. Anything more? All right, oh, yes.
Did you ever get to go inside any of these barns to really get the atmosphere of the inside of the barn?
No, I did
Capture
not.
that? I was just curious.
I was always like far away with my iPhone.
Mhm.
Yeah,
The voyeur, not the adventurer.
no. Snap, 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 get back in the car, let's go.
Before somebody says something to us. right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you all for coming. I just want to make sure that you know, on the wall here and on the landing of the mezzanine, or before you leave, pop that QR code, get on our mailing list, come see a number of, any of our upcoming exhibits and artist talks. I'd really love to have this community of people who appreciate the work of California artists and who come and engage with us over the years. So.
And I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
There'll be a portion of the proceeds of the show and all my past shows. This is my 4th solo show. A portion of the proceeds will go to the Trevor Project, which focuses on suicide in the young LGBT community. Just suicide prevention.
Mhm. And is there like trevorproject.org, or do you know what?
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, please take a look at that and understand that any purchase you make of Don's work will be going towards that very worthy cause.
Yeah, every show I've done, I've donated money to them.
That's awesome. All right, well, thank you very much.